off-road racing, 4x4s, quads, bikes, varying conditions and time trials. It's the 1998 Sugarbelt 400. Round 3 of the National Off-Road Racing Championships saw a huge entry of cars, motorcycles and quads assemble at the scenic Beaumont Farmers Club near Aston in Natal for the AGA Panasonic Sugarbelt 400. With a round of the well-supported Natal Regional Championships tagged onto the event, the entry swelled to almost 300. It didn't faze the organisers though, and the Natal Off-Road Racing Club laid out a very compact 400-kilometre route that took competitors over varied terrains. Leading the production vehicle category were locals Neil Woodridge and Paul Vermaak in the ex-Barry Dakar Vodacom Mitsubishi Pajero, which won its debut race at the Barbaspan 400. Woodridge is often referred to as the Alain Prost of local off-road racing.
I think the strategy in any off-road racing is to go as fast as you can, but not too hard. You know, off-road racing, you don't know where you're going, you haven't seen it before, so push as hard as you can, especially in the time trial, but make sure it stays on all four wheels.
The AGA Panasonic Castrol KTM team dominated the two-wheel category. Multiple champion Alfie Cox and rising star Rian van Niekerk shared the points lead, with the vastly experienced former champion Jeremy Davies not far behind.
Well, the dust is going to be a problem, especially in the morning when the sun's pretty low, and I think if you can just use your head and not go wild and crash, you should be able to hang in there.
There was a close battle for supremacy in the special vehicle category as Queenstown's Greg Harvey and Boy Stone held a slender lead over Richard Carolyn in his single-seater.
Oh, but you faced with a really difficult task here. Tell us what arose and how it's going to be tomorrow.
Well, I obviously didn't read the regulations correctly, and I ended up arriving at the start. It's about 2 minutes behind time. I went through scrutineering a minute before 1. The guy said, "You're cutting it a bit fine." I got to the start and I was told I was not allowed to start, and that my penalty would be 90 minutes. Plus they give me maximum time for the speed section, which is 45 minutes. So 45 plus 90 gives us over 2 hours that I'm starting behind everyone.
After Vickers van Deventer missed the opening round, last year's champ Christo van der Merwe led the quad brigade on his Yamaha 350 from 200 rider Cornel de Villiers. Wildman Jacques Stubich held third on his Honda, while van Deventer had but 3 points to show so far.
Ek het die eerste wedren kon ek ongelukkig nie ry nie. Ek het nog nie 'n fiets gehad nie. En Barbaspan was my eerste wedren en ongelukkig het die as gebreek. Ek het baie hard probeer. Maar ek dink van hier af sal dit baie beter gaan met my.
Richard Schilling made his first appearance of the year after breaking his leg in a skiing accident over Christmas, and he tackled the time trial with typical gusto to set the fastest time. Botswana's youthful crew of Shamer Variawa and Layakat Khan was second in their race go, ahead of the ever-reliable Reyneke and Houghton, who proved quickest of the production category entrants. Others weren't so fortunate, and prospects looked bleak for Kasi Kutse and Piet Swanepoel in the turbo Toyota Hilux.
We started the car up a couple of days ago. I had a bit of a misfire. Worked on it and actually had it sorted out. Got here and found it's not right. We now discovered we have a hole in the exhaust manifold leading to the turbo. This causes a lot of hot gases getting into the engine compartment, which are extremely fire hazard. Besides the fact that we're losing a lot of power, and I'd rather fix it now, maybe lose some time on the speed trial, and then do a decent run tomorrow.
They were not the only ones with problems though. There were also some niggling problems in the Mitsubishi camp, as Woolridge explains.
It touches on something like that, it's gone. So with putting the supercharger, the fan in the front was running very close to the radiator. So we decided to fit an electric fan in the front. And we thought we might have an overheating problem, but we decided to risk it and to run the time trial without the Visco fan. But yeah, with such a hot day and a tight course, it's running very hot and we need to change it.
If the time trial was a portent of things to come, then it seemed as though there would be few finishes. The big Class A 4x4 Ford Courier of Super Series champion Paolo Piazzamuso and Stratford Voigt lost over 2 hours on the time trial, and the crew had little time before the impound to effect the necessary repairs.
Well, we had a power steering belt go, and we were courteous enough to let somebody go through, and we went off the route, and then reversing, getting back on the route, we put a wheel off, and the thing fell into a ditch, so it was an interesting time trial for us.
So that time trial, which determined the starting order for the following day, won by Schilling and Thorn, and Reinecker and Houghton, the quickest production vehicle of the day. The Botswana pairing of Riawa and Khan took second spot. As expected, Alfie Cox on home ground proved unbeatable in the bike classes, completing the distance well clear of his rivals. This year, he will also be competing in the World Championships in the Atlas Marathon Rally in Morocco.
The rally that starts in Granada in Spain, exactly like the Dakar, and it's 8 days in Morocco, in the mountains of Morocco, and finishing in Marrakesh 8 days later. Total, I think, of 4,500 kilometers. So the reason why it's important to go to that one, it's part of the Dakar.
Vickers van Deventer fired a warning salvo by displaying his fitness and setting the pace in the quad class. And at the top, Alfie Cox, after his fine racing in the Paris to Dakar, this is no surprise. Dalton, Krill and Bloemveld taking third, fourth and fifth, while in the quads, it was van Deventer all the way with a good margin to spare over Van der Merwe. There was an early 6 a.m. start for Saturday's action, and as the sun began to rise over the horizon, breakfast was served while the cars were being warmed up in the holding area at the start. First to get ready for the start was the Jimco V8 of Schilling and navigator Ashley Thorne. Starting first is seldom an advantage, as all that happens is that the route becomes more obvious to those following. However, with the expected dust problem, Schilling was more than happy to start first. A unique feature of this race is that the cars and bikes are separated. Cars start first and complete 2 laps of the east loop prior to heading west, while the bikes tackle the west loop before moving on to the eastern part. Both drivers and riders rate this event high.
The route is traditionally very well marked here in Natal. They use this double marker 100 meters before the turn, and then a double marker on the turn, and immediately after the turn a confirmation. They also give you a lot of other markers like L for lurkers, being big rocks, hidden rocks in the grass, and an asterisk for a very tight corner. So, as I say, traditionally it's very well marked, so we shouldn't have a problem, and of course we're going to have a huge advantage with no dust in front of us.
6 a.m. and with the sun low on the horizon, Schilling and Thorne power away from the start. Ahead lies 400 kilometers of racing over unknown territory as the Botswana team leaves just 30 seconds later. It's the navigator's task to pick out the route. Robin Houghton makes it sound very, very simple indeed.
The driver's worried about, his driving capabilities, but as a navigator, being so dependent on route schedules, marking, things like that, it's pretty tricky. You don't know what's out there. Maybe it's well marked, maybe it's badly marked, maybe you're going to spend the whole day looking for the route. So it's a little bit tense. Luckily, this event's normally well marked, so as a navigator, I'm quite looking forward to it, in fact.
Manfred Schroeder knows the area very well.
I mean, we've had this race for about 8 years now, and I've been racing since then about, so I also know the terrain quite well. And me being a farmer, cane farmer as well, also helps.
Headed by local hero Cox, the huge motorcycle entry set off to tackle the western section of the event. At the moment, there's no one else who can match the consistency and pace of the multiple Pinetown-based champion. Another local rider is Rob Campbell on the Shimwell's Yamaha 250, went well on the time trial. This loop was much more mountainous than the eastern loop, and it took riders over narrow tracks through forests. This lap proved much slower than the eastern one, which had some very high-speed sections through sugarcane plantations. The bikers also had the advantage of having the sun behind them, but already dust was becoming a problem, as there tends to be little or no wind at this time of the day and at this time of the year. Watch local Yamaha rider Barry Krill as he kicks up a cloud of dust for Russell Campbell Kawasaki pilot Greg Aspinall to contend with. Riding in dust requires vast amounts of concentration, and riders need to take a conservative approach. Clayton Enslin is another of the dedicated rising stars. This year he moved up to the 250 class and leads season campaigner Jeremy Davies, who follows on his conic Shell Honda. Rian van Niekerk won the 200 class in each of the opening races and moved into an early class lead therefore. Everything was going right for Reinecker and Houghton as they built up a handy production category lead. Not only that, they were also leading the race overall. Bahrain's little Class B Mighty Mag was ahead of Obert Carolyn's menacing Class A Raceco, and the narrow tracks provided few overtaking opportunities. Carolyn had been fortunate as he was allowed to complete the time trial without incurring a penalty. Nandus Alberts and Pieter Mattia have had little luck of late, but their Raceco is running well in fourth place ahead of Schroeder's nimble Orco. Schilling's dust advantage of starting first turned into a nightmare as they wrong-slotted down a sugarcane-lined road and they dropped out of contention. Driving through the thick dust into the sun was slowing down the Penzor Land Rover of Cliff Barker and Heinrich Latergan. Life isn't always easy in the office for off-road races. Having largely overcome his overheating problem, Woolridge's day started badly when the Pajero lost four-wheel drive early in the event and started dropping back. The powerful Chevy of Theo Coetzee and Ian Wedderburn was running well despite Wedderburn suffering the effects of car sickness, but they were to roll out of proceedings shortly before the end. Back to the bikes, and Cox looked to be in command as he stretched the 360cc KTM's legs on the straights and built up a slight lead over his pursuers aboard 250s, who was still being led by Campbell. Then it was the relaxed-looking Krill who even had time to entertain spectators with a couple of wheelies. But they had to be fast spectators. Cox's teammate Darryl Curtis was hanging in well and riding well within his limits during the early stages, a rather clever approach. After a few seasons out of the saddle while circuit car racing, this year is effectively Jeremy Davies' comeback year, and he shows that he's lost none of the skill that won him his championships. Conic Shell Honda rider Graham McLaughlin has moved up to the Big Banger 500 class, but almost threw away all his hard work there. And this was almost a coming together between KTM's Jeffrey Voliter and Kawasaki's Quinton Milton, who misjudged his pace into the corner because of the dust. A lucky escape, but he was soon on his way again. The quads had started behind the bikes, and Van Deventer, the Gulwa blonde Yamaha, was setting a blistering pace as he held a narrow advantage over similarly mounted reigning champion Christo van der Merwe on the Joburg Yamaha machine. Jacques Stubis' unique and surprisingly rapid four-stroke Jojo Tanks Honda carried him into third place. Spectacular little machines, these quads. Aubrey Kavanagh gets it wrong, but recovers quickly to blast off in a shower of stones, only to have the helpful and much amused helicopter crew point out that he's heading in the wrong direction. A case of more haste, less speed, perhaps. Proving that teammates work together, Wayland Smith looks to be well in control of his blaster as he finds the correct route. But then blots his copybook by getting on the power a tad early, and he lets the rear wheel take out a fence post and a few meters of fencing. Poor farmer. Meanwhile, on the east loop, the Toyota Land Cruiser of Reinecker and Houghton was simply flying. During the summer break, tuning fundi Roger Taylor had been given the task of turning the Land Cruiser into a proper off-road racer. It now features much more suspension travel and better weight distribution as opposed to last year's car. Former Formula Ford and GTI circuit racer Bahrain was still holding off the much more powerful Raceco of Carolyn, but the nature of the terrain and heavy dust ensured that passing was almost impossible. Carolyn was also being hampered by a rear brake problem, which didn't help matters at all. Alberts and Matteo were running strongly. Their VW-powered Raceco is fitted with a trick automatic gearbox, which in certain conditions is a great help. Barker and Latergan were holding a strong second in the production category race. Despite the V8 sounding strong, they seemed unable to make any impression on the leading Toyota. Special category championship leaders Harvey and Stone were running at a steady pace in fourth, but keeping a watchful eye on Schilling and Thorne, who were charging hard after suffering a puncture. Gentlemen pull off far enough to allow other competitors free passage when they strike problems. This is one of the unwritten laws of off-road racing. Eastern Cape's Class B quick-fit raceco crew of Newton Love and Colin Pote must have been relieved to see that rule is still respected. Prior to the start, they were lying 6th in the championship, and a good result here was all important for them. Tony Yo, who races with his wife Mandy, had higher hopes for his Saybat Land Rover.
Competition-wise, Pajera's my benchmark, and I'm going to take an ex-Perry Deco Pajera and give him carrots this time. It's his turn. And of course, see what we can do with the other 4x4s. Should beat Cliffy and see what we can do with that one.
A positive man. Powered by a 2.8-litre BMW motor, the Landy can be heard from miles away. Kenny Scholthammer was also upbeat.
Well, you know what they say. We'll talk tomorrow night. He's not in my category, he's in Class D, but I think this little Class E can do the job and beat him. So we'll have a look tomorrow evening. We'll look at the results when they show.
Wooldridge and Vermaak were still running well, not quite on the leader's pace, but well enough considering that they were keeping an eye on the temperature gauge and only having two-wheel drive with which to transmit 3.5 litres of supercharged power to the ground. At least they were happy and still mobile.
And what happened to you?
No, we ran out of fuel.
So?
Yeah, well, that's it. Gonna get some more, see if we can get going again.
What problem did you have?
No, we just got stuck inside here and then we broke the car. Somebody tried to pull me out and he smashed the engine cage onto the alternator. So I can't. Yeah, that's all.
So guys, this is it. Back on the road again.
Back on the road, yeah. Get going. We still got till, I think, cut-off's about 4 o'clock, so we should finish it. Got enough fuel in the pits.
Yeah, well, no, fine. By now, the leading bikes were on the east loop, having completed their first section, and Cox was showing no signs of relaxing his pace at the front. He makes it look so easy, doesn't he? A couple of minutes behind Campbell was having the race of his life, despite finding the odd car stuck en route. No problems, though, as the drivers had either pulled off or given fair warning. It was the same for everyone, though, and Spencer Kirill seemed to be enjoying himself. Next up was the ever-spectacular Darryl Curtis on his trusty KTM. In fact, it almost seemed as though the two-wheel brigade had entered into a competition, unofficial that is, to see who could land closest to our poor cameraman. That's a tough job, but someone has to do it. There was the odd stream that competitors had to contend with. 200 class leader Van Niekerk hardly seemed to notice it at all. Neither did fellow KTM rider Evan Pretorius, nor Shumwell's Yamaha rider Craig Ramsey. By now the cars were well into the west loop and the order at the front hadn't changed at all. But it soon did, as Reinecker punctured a tyre and dropped back a few places. Often races like this become a race of attrition, but this year all the front-running cars had proved to be reliable. Class B leader Bo Rain was still holding off his bigger-engined rival Carolyn. This battle had been raging since the start and showed little signs of letting up. Tarka winners Harvey and Stone still held third in the category and were close enough to the leaders to take advantage should either of them wrong slot or pick up a puncture. Schilling's enthusiasm almost got the better of him. Those trees are many and unforgiving. Barker was still holding second in the production category and was having his final outing in his Land Rover that took him to the 94 championship. His new steed will be both lighter and more powerful. Remy Moons and Frans van Lissau travelled from Windhoek, but it was to no avail as they retired before completing the second section. There was a lot more water on this section than on the first loop, but dust was still a problem. Locals Richard Everingham and Dion Leroux have always gone well on this event in their soft-built ETT Bushmaster. On this loop, they moved up to second in class to maintain their record. Although the quads had started well behind the bikes, the cars had easily caught some of the stragglers. It must be pretty scary being a quad rider and knowing that there's a 2-ton Land Rover bearing down on you. Sadly, the Land Rover never made it to the end after its gearbox gave up the ghost. By now, the leading Pajero was starting to slip back a bit as the roads became rougher and two-wheel drive became a bigger disadvantage. Lesotho's Wilfried Weslau's unique Perspex-bodied racecar enables spectators to see a driver at work. He's one of the stalwarts of off-road racing and has been for almost 20 years. Former two-wheel expert Nick Harper, now teamed up with Andrew Chalupsky, was struggling with a dust and a puncture on their ex-Shilling Championship winning racecar. That didn't help them either. Another Lesotho-based crew is that of Alex Sally and Ashraf Abu Bakr in the Lady Brand Land Rover V8 racecar. Despite a misfire, they were looking for a top 6 placing. Perhaps the most unusual car seen regularly is the plastic-bodied Chev special of Johan Gerber and Kutsiela Beskagni. The ex-Woolridge Nissan Sani Turbo is in the hands of Derek and Tina de Bruin, but they were not having a very happy time of it at all.
Cautions are marked. Some of the cautions are marked in the right places and others in the wrong places. We've damaged 2 rims, we've had 2 blowouts so far, and we also have overheating. So I think we've blown head gaskets. But other than that, yeah, it's a good event, it's a good race.
And other than that, everything was fine, thank you. Some of the regional motorcyclists were also battling. Ian Marsh and Yamaha barely flopped in the mud, and to add insult to injury, quad leader Van Deventer arrives and covers him in mud again. Van der Merwe could do little about reducing the gap to Van Deventer and had almost resigned himself to second place, although he still had Stubich too close for comfort. After more than 7 hours in the cockpit, Bo Rain had arrived back at the Beaumont Farmers Club to claim the win after a closely fought race with Carolyn. With the taxing conditions and without the luxury of a navigator, Marius admitted that it was a difficult task.
It was this morning. It was very slippery, it was wet, we couldn't see, the sun was shining in our eyes up until about 8:30, and after that we started pushing the pace a bit and everything went well for me.
Second, despite doing the last section without any rear brakes, which lost him 5 minutes, was Carolyn. Then it was Harvey and Stone after another steady performance. The drive of the day must surely go to Piazza Musso and Vught, who started third last after their time trial mishap and finished 11th. Reinicke and Houghton were convincing production category winners, and you can bet that they were happy to be back on the rostrum again.
30 kilometers uit van die einde af tot 'n papwiel gekry. Wat ons bietjie baie tyd geneem, omtrent 8 minute afgevat van ons om te ruil. En 2 van die spysvrouens by ons verby, weer die een gevang, maar nie kon nie daarin slaag om die tweede een te vang nie, maar nogtans baie tevrede omdat ons kategorie wen. Ons neem nie deel, ons kompeteer nie teen die spysvrouens nie, maar dit is altyd lekker om hulle weg te ry.
Some 8 minutes after the Toyota, Barker and Lateghan came home to take second, while the Birkin brothers got third to take the Class E honours ahead of Schulthammer and Mark Ferguson in the Pajero. Class G went to Hein Grobler and Charles Vormerans in yet another Toyota, while none of the Class F cars finished. With wife Hazel and the newest Cox baby waiting for him, Cox arrived home to take the motorcycle honours with a comfortable 5-minute gap over 250 class winner, teammate Darrell Curtis, who'd stopped to help an injured rider. Hello, recognise your dad? Yes, of course you do.
Another great victory there?
Yeah, today I had to use the dust to my advantage, and you know, yesterday I knew I'd have an absolutely perfect time trial, and it worked well for me to get the lead, and then I knew this morning they would have to catch me and pass in the dust, and we know it's winter time now and it's very dusty here, and I just used the dust to my advantage, kept a good pace all day, and it's been really great.
Good finish, but somewhat of an interesting day for you.
It's worked very hard today. We started off this morning, I left 8, and Lance Chathur and myself found Errol Dalton that had a very bad fall, and we helped him get back on his feet, with concussed and all the rest. And then we left again, we left about 25th, and we had to work our way through the field again, so it was a very hard day for me. There's a lot of dust and it was very hot out there. And the last 2 laps I especially had a hard time with Robin Campbell and Spencer Creel. I followed them all the way through on the second last lap, and then luckily on the last lap, they both made mistakes and I got through.
Great sportsmanship there. Jeffrey Wanneter won the 200 class to make it a KTM benefit race. Well, almost.
I train a lot, train 4 times a week, and you find you get your second wind and you just keep going, you just get stronger and stronger as the race goes on.
Behind Curtis were Yamaha riders Rob Campbell and Spencer Krill, while Elmer Simmons was the first Honda rider home in 5th ahead of Barry Krill on another Yamaha. 200 class winner Bonneter claimed 10th. no question about the quad winner as Van Deventer arrived to huge applause after yet another great ride.
Nee, ek het nie probleme gehad nie. Dit was baie lekker. Die tweede loop was halwe van 'n short course met al die ramps en goed. Dit het nog my goal uitgehaal. Maar dit is baie lekker. Ek geniet so wedren. Ek dink dit is fantasties om so 'n kort wedren te hê. Lang wedren, die spoed is te vinnig. Hierdie wedren is fantasties.
Van der Merwe was second as Yamaha rider Mark Breckel managed to get ahead of Strubich on the last loop to snatch third place. A good performance from John Craig Costello saw him take the 200cc class honours. And spare a thought for this man, Paulo Piazzamuso, who overtook more competitors than anyone else. Round 4 of the series is the Toyota 1000 Desert Race, which takes place in Botswana over the weekend of the 12th to the 13th of June. Until then, happy motoring.